She has almost a month to go before the South Carolina primary at this point. February 24th, that's an awful long time. The party apparatus is putting all kinds of pressure on her to drop out, including the party chairwoman. So we'll see if she even makes it that far.
Welcome to The Debrief, where we talk with the Washington Examiner's top journalists about the headlines they're covering and where the story's going next. I'm Sarah Bedford, and I'm here with magazine editor David Mark. And David, Nikki Haley pulled off a strong performance, but a loss in New Hampshire in the primaries this week. She is trying to sort of spin this loss as a win of sorts. Is that working?
Not really. It looked like for a few days before the New Hampshire primary, former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley might be able to pull off an upset, but not surprisingly, Donald Trump, the former president seeking the 2024 nomination, came out on top by double digits in the end. So there's only so much you can spin it. A loss is a loss, particularly coming after Iowa. And New Hampshire was probably Haley's high water mark. It's the best state or among the best states where the electorate might fit her message. So there's just no real way to call it a win and be serious about it.
You know, looking back is not super useful for Haley at this point, but would a win have sent her on a different trajectory from here? And what could she have done differently to get that win?
Well, I think it's useful only because I think it plays to larger weaknesses in her campaign. And then if you look back to John McCain in 2000, the first time he ran against then Texas Governor George W. Bush, he was the decided underdog. His strategy was just to be open to everybody in New Hampshire. He would wait at town hall meetings until the last question was asked. He would have reporters on the bus around New Hampshire, and he would let people ask anything and everything they wanted, and he would give honest, straight answers. That meant some bad news stories on abortion and same-sex marriage, other issues where he got in trouble with the media, but that was kind of part of the strategy, to say, hey, here's what I think, and people do. She is way too cautious for that. She kind of put up her guard, gave her same stump speech. She campaigned aggressively, but not as hard as she could have. She canceled debates with Ron DeSantis, her former rival, and it just seemed like she was trying to keep walls up around herself.
What's the rationale then at this point for her staying in the race if the only state that she really realistically looks like she could pull off a win in is South Carolina, her home state, which is, it's giving John Kasich in 2016. You know, what's her rationale?
Yeah, the undercurrent of this whole strategy is that something could still happen to Trump. Of course, he faces 91 criminal charges cumulatively over 4 trials. The guy's not in the greatest health. He's 77 years old. You never know what might happen on the campaign trail. And in theory, if she has a delegate batch, even like a third of how many delegates he has, that would still put her in a better position than somebody else going into the nomination fight to the party convention based on the rules. But that's an awful long shot. She has almost a month to go before the South Carolina primary at this point. February 24th, that's an awful long time. The party apparatus is putting all kinds of pressure on her to drop out, including the party chairwoman. So we'll see if she even makes it that far.
Not to put you on the spot about the rules, but that made me think. Let's say, God forbid, Donald Trump was hit by a bus tomorrow. Can Tim Scott, Ron DeSantis, can they undrop out? I mean, can they get back at any point? Because Nikki Haley doesn't seem like she would be what a consensus replacement would look like, right?
And that's a great point, because that's always been kind of the shortcoming in that whole strategy of just, maybe something will happen to Trump. Probably would not just be Ron DeSantis and Tim Scott. It might be a bunch of other people who didn't even enter the race. So if it's wide open at that point, and Donald Trump is not the nominee, that's a totally different political calculation at that point. It's people who took a pass on 2024. Of course, it's all speculative at this point, but it's whatever they're all thinking.
It would be an absolute mess, is what
Yeah,
you're
that's
saying.
for sure.
And finally, Donald Trump is at this point expected to become the nominee, despite everything we just talked about. At what point strategically would it make sense for him to announce his vice president, and what characteristics does that VP pick need to have to benefit him, do you think?
You know, it's interesting. A lot of this has to do with what the Republican National Committee may want to do. There's been some chatter among people who are informed that they might actually move the nomination pick of Trump to be the nominee for the Republican Party just past Super Tuesday on March 19th, which would be months earlier than the Republican convention in July. That would give the candidate the advantage of being able to spend general election money. This really gets into the weeds. The thing about doing that is he would, under federal law, he would have to choose a running mate by then. So I assume they're looking at it now. As for the qualities, you would want somebody you would think he would want somebody who is going to go along with anything he has to do. Remember what he asked Mike Pence to do to basically overturn a free and fair election. There's probably plenty of people who would be willing to do that. But I think Trump also wants somebody who doesn't get too much attention. And that's where it gets tricky. Somebody like Congresswoman Elise Stefanik of upstate New York, who has been a bulldog on behalf of Trump, but he might say, you know, she gets a little bit too much TV time. And so maybe he wants somebody lower key like Senator Tim Scott of South Carolina, or it could just be some obscure congressman woman that we're not even thinking about right now.
Right, like Mike Pence was kind of an obscure choice at the time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say it worked out pretty well for Trump, maybe until the last, last 13, 14 days of their administration.
Well, David, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you.
You can get more writing from David and the rest of the political team at washingtonexaminer.com.